Mr. Brock, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Minister Blair, welcome. Minister, do you know how much the Department of National Defense spends on management consulting contracts last year?
I don't have that number available to me, but I've got some pretty good people who may have that information. Brian?
Approximately $73 million.
That's correct. It's exactly $73 million. We asked your department to furnish us with details, and that's the response that we got. $73 million when men and women of our services are couch surfing, lining up at food banks, money not spent on boots, money not spent on equipment. There is indeed a morale crisis with our service personnel. And to make matters worse, we learned that Canada, at any given point in time, has enough ammunition to last about 3 days. Does that concern you, Minister?
Yeah, of course. As a matter of fact,
should.
and I would refer you to the new defense policy update, Arno Strong and Free, that I just released, where we actually articulated those concerns and the investments that we needed to make. And by the way, the money to do that, to invest in for example, ammunition production and provide the money for long-term contracts is in that document, but it's also in the 2024 budget.
Thank you.
And so
Thank you, Minister. I got to move on. My time is very limited. I
Okay.
appreciate your response. So I got a list of all these middlemen contractors. These are contractors who are retained by the Government of Canada to ultimately hire professionals. And surprisingly, one of the entries is from SNC-Lavalin, the company that was mired in controversy not too long ago, facing bribery, corruption, and fraud charges, ultimately put pressure so much on the Prime Minister and his staff that would lead to another conviction of ethical violations. They would be probably the last person the Government of Canada would want to align itself with, yet SNC-Lavalin got $115,000. So the question is very simple. Why did taxpayer monies of $115,000 go to this company?
Well, and again, I don't know that particular contract, and I don't know whether my officials would have that information, but I'd invite them to provide it if you require it.
Officials?
I don't have the details on that contract.
What did SNC-Lavalin do?
Not
You don't have details?
sure,
To
Mr.
provide
Chair,
us with details?
when the dates were when that contract was in place.
last year.
but we can look it up.
It was last year.
And as Troy mentioned, we're talking about an incredibly large number
Yeah,
of
I got to
contracts
move
that
on,
they-
Minister.
So
I
having the
appreciate
particular
that.
details of one of them,
I appreciate that. I'm looking at this list. It's roughly 3 pages. They're either corporations, limited corporations. The identity is pretty much explanatory as to what they do. Yet there is one entry for an individual by the name of Melanie Randall. Would she be a Liberal donor or affiliated with the Liberal Party of Canada?
Melanie Randall is.
Well, Melanie Randall received $137,812.49 of taxpayer funds. I know I certainly want to know, and I'm sure all Canadians want to know, why a certain individual has received a pretty significant contract. I'd like to know who she is, what she did for this government, and what value has Canadians received. You'll provide that to me, Mr. Crosby?
Yes, we can do that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Here's another big one. Pardon the pun, because the name is Big Rideau Leadership Services. Last year they got $14,000. Do you know what they did?
Not specifically, Mr. Chair.
Do you know where they work from?
I'm not specifically aware. I've heard of the name of the contractor before.
Well, we did a search, and Big Rideau Leadership Services works in a residential area just outside of Ottawa on 6 Brandy Creek Crescent, likely working out of their home office or basement, just like the infamous GC Strategies.
Point of order,
Which-
Chair. I'm just concerned about personal information being given out about individuals. I don't know where this is going, but
Public domain.
you know, we know that Mr. Yo was a conservative donor, but you know, I don't really see where
Point
this
of order
is
on
going.
that point of order, Chair.
Yes, Mr. Brock.
Okay.
point of order.
We're going to correct the record once and for all because both Ms. Shanahan and Ms. Khalid are misrepresenting the evidence that this
Point of
committee
order,
had
Chair.
heard.
That's
I've got the
really-
floor, Chair.
Point of order, Chair.
Got the
I'll
floor.
hear you in just 1 second.
Are both misrepresenting the evidence of Mr.
Chair,
Yao.
I'm sorry, I cannot
Mr.
allow
Yao
those kind of comments to
presented
stand, Chair.
a
My
donor
apologies,
card,
Chair, I
Okay,
can't
thank you.
get
not a
those comments to
membership
stand.
card
All right.
from the
Absolutely.
Conservative
Remember
Party
the
of Canada.
translators. Okay, thank you, Mr. Brock. You've made your point. Ms. Khalid, you have a point of order?
Not anymore, Chair.
Okay. So, Mr. Brock, you have just literally a few
I
seconds.
got one question left.
In a few seconds, so no preamble, please. Please ask
Yeah.
the question.
How many millions of taxpayer funds have been shoveled to consultants working out of their basement?
We don't shovel taxpayer dollars anymore.
Paid out to consultants working out of their
that's an
basement.
entirely
Mr.
different
Brock, your time is up, and I heard a response from the minister. So next up is Mr. Nader for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, Chair, thank you, Minister, for joining us here this afternoon. Just to quickly preempt the potential Liberal gotcha moment that they may want to share in their next round when they try to wave around David Yo's membership card. They would know that Mr. Yo's membership became disactive and non-active the moment he ran for a different political party. So just to try to preempt their gotcha moment, it ceased to be active once our party learned of his other party. But Chair, to Minister again, thank you for joining us. First, has the RCMP contacted you directly about the ArriveCAN? No. Thank you for that, Chair. When your cabinet colleague, Minister Anand, appeared before us on April 18th, she was very clear that it was the CBSA that was at fault for the ArriveCAN scandal and for the cost overruns. In fact, in a response to a question from Mr. Desjardins, she said, and I'm going to quote this, it was because the CBSA did not follow the rules. Do you agree with your cabinet colleague, Minister Anand, that the CBSA is the federal agency responsible for the cost overruns with the ArriveCAN scandal?
I haven't had the benefit of seeing the information that perhaps Minister Anand has, and so I'm unable to come to that conclusion in the absence of that information or evidence.
But you have read the report. You've read the Auditor General
Yes.
report. So would you agree that it was CBSA that was primarily responsible for the...
I would agree that there were very significant deficiencies in the control of those contracts. But actually determined that it wasn't as clear in the Auditor General's report that I read as to the assignment of responsibility or blame.
Okay, so you were the minister for a significant period of time as public safety minister, under which CBSA is responsible.
Yep.
Given the benefit of hindsight, and of course no one can predict the future, but given the benefit of hindsight, would you not agree that there were deficient processes at CBSA that allowed for this contract or allowed for this app to be developed at a significant cost over? Would you at least accept?
Well,
that?
and John, as I've tried to make clear earlier, when I was in that position, at no time did I ever authorize anyone in any of the agencies that I was responsible for as Minister of Public Safety to disobey the rules that were in place, and they're well-articulated rules with respect to how these contracts are to be managed. And at no time, unfortunately, was I made aware of the deficiencies that the Auditor General did a good job and brought forward. But I can also tell you that in reading that Auditor General report, we have fulfilled our responsibilities to act quickly to make sure that the deficiencies are properly addressed, that people are held to account, and that we put in place appropriate measures to make sure that that does not happen again.
Would you agree then perhaps that your officials failed at that point in time? Did Mr. Ozowski fail at that time in properly ensuring that the agency had proper controls in place?
And respectfully, I don't believe I have enough information available to me to determine exactly. But as I've already indicated, the responsibility is primarily that of the deputy head of an agency, and so there is a level of responsibility there. And as I've said as well, as the Minister of Public Safety, as I then was, I also have responsibility to ensure that when these deficiencies are identified, that we respond in an appropriate way, that people are held to account, and that steps are taken to ensure that we maintain the integrity of those procurement processes.
When was the first time you learned of the existence of the company GC Strategies?
When the Auditor General came out with a report. I was not, as I've already said, I'm not involved in any of our HR or procurement processes. I don't hire and I don't authorize or approve any of those contracts.
Were you aware prior to the Auditor General's report of the concept of ghost contracting? Were you aware of that?
No, sir.
Okay. In your opening comments, you made a comment about 2 investigations, and I just want you to clarify this, related to David Yo's employment and contracting. Am I correct in that there were 2 investigations?
That's the information that I understand from the former Deputy Minister.
And who undertook those investigations?
My understanding is that they were done within the department itself.
Okay. And would you be willing to share those investigations with this committee?
They're not my investigations. The department was doing an internal review of what had taken place in the processes. They investigated those matters.
So, but it was the Department of National Defense undertook those investigations. Would the Deputy Minister be in a position to confirm whether she could share those reports with this committee?
So if I could clarify, one of them, Public Service Commission, about the external hiring process, and similarly, a report on the hiring process from the perspective within the department.
Let me, your time, could those be shared with the committee?
I believe they can.
Thank you. We'll look for those. That's your time, Mr. Nader? Yeah.
You know, we also have responsibilities with respect to privacy interest in the maintaining the confidentiality of certain measures.
Yeah.
I'm sure the HR official would advise me of that.
Very good.